In today's video, we're going to go over DC, the downfall of DC, and can DC be revived? So we're going to go over an article that's very interesting from former DC president Diane Nelson, who was there during Snyder's reign. And her comments are actually really interesting because it's always interesting to get people's thoughts of why DC failed and all this kind of stuff. But to have someone who was actually there come out and say a lot of outlandish but true things because she was actually in charge. So, yo, what is freaking good YouTube voice you have you on your animation subscribe to never miss anything Marvel, DC, Kaiju, Monsterverse, pop culture based content that we try to cover on a daily basis. Good subscribe channel, turn notifications on, and let me know what was DC's downfall, because DC has not hit in a very, very long time. Yes, I did appreciate and like the Snyder stuff, but as a whole, they haven't hit a good movie in a very long time. So there's an article going around the internet with the title of this: DC Comics president thought Joss Whedon's Justice League was terrible. That's interesting. Former DC president Diane Nelson talks about the single biggest thing that made us look amateurish, certainly relative to Marvel, if not just on its own. So, DC President Diane Nelson compared DC unfavorable to Marvel. So, it's very interesting if you're a DC fan. Also, if you could, check us out on Instagram at Warstu to see the beautiful face behind the beautiful voice. And also, if you could, check us out on Instagram. So, Diane Nelson said, certainly there was an undercurrent of frustration that we were not hitting the mark. We were not a standalone studio the way Marvel was, but a lot of people seem to think they were. They've only just become independent currently with DC Studios, but are they really independent? We don't know. They were a freestanding studio with their own production budgets and their own production staff. They were really charting their own course. And yeah, Marvel did great up until phase 4. Of course, they did an amazing job out of it. The fans assumed that we at Warner Bros. Were replicating the organizational structure of Marvel. In fact, we did not. And it was quite intentional. She continues, I don't know that there was an appreciation for the extent to which DC team really just had a seat at the table. We would have had the heads of each of the relevant business and DC to talk about DC related issues, including our own slate of film, television, video games, and so on and so forth. But DC was not the one leading the charge. Honestly, I'm not sure there was anyone leading the charge. It wasn't the culture of Warner Bros. To dedicate a particular strategy. That is insane. She's basically saying DC had no plan at all. They were kind of just freeballing it, which is wild because Marvel ran the studio independently. Sure, Bob Iger, etc., always had us looking, but it wasn't ran close to that. So Diane Nelson wasn't happy about all this. The idea of a slate just felt like a window dressing. The bottom line is there was never a thoughtful, well-controlled, confidential slate process. I think it's just the biggest thing that made us look amateurish, certainly relative to Marvel, if not just on its own. That is insane because everyone loves to blame Zack Snyder. But it seems like no one was in control. It's absolutely, this is someone in charge of DC coming out and saying this. But what she says next is even more interesting. Diane Nelson pushed back against that. Unless there was a meeting that happened that no one told me about, which is possible, I don't know, there was ever any conversation where it was decided that Zack would lead DC slate for any particular period of time. So even if it was a conscious decision that Zack Snyder was our Kevin Feige, from a consumer standpoint, that kind of what happened for a while there. There was a place for Zack's movies. I would have always wanted Zack to be part of DC filmmaking lineup. But should he have been the one defining the universe? Maybe not. In hindsight, hard question. This is insane. Because it sounds like he was in charge, but he wasn't officially in charge. And then this gets even more crazy in a roundabout way. And then there was what happened after Zack Snyder delivered his version of Justice League. There was a desire to ensure that the movie was not too long and that there was an opportunity for more heart and humor. And then, oh well, we're going to bring in another director to help. The Joss Whedon factor. That would be Joss Whedon. who would heavily rewrite, recut, re-edit, shoot new footage, including the now infamous CGI Superman lip with Henry Cavill. Why would you do that to his face and his mustache? Had grown a mustache, he couldn't had shaved it because he was shooting Mission Impossible. And what did Diane think of what they got? This remark is insane. My characterization of Joss was a bit of a shiny penny during a time when they were looking for something shiny to grab onto. Yeah, I mean, I thought the final film was terrible. Yeah, I mean, I would have much preferred a darker than I wanted, or longer than I hoped for. Zack Snyder's cut than the Frankenstein cut we got in theaters. The trilogy of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman should have, by any measures, blown any superhero movie away, but it didn't. And everyone keeps blaming Zack Snyder. You've even got these little YouTube channels blaming Zack Snyder now, when realistically, if you've read this article, Zack Snyder wasn't even in charge. Insane. A few years later, we would get the Justice League director's cut so everyone could judge for themselves and come to the precise same conclusion as Diana Nelson did, that they should have just ran with Zack's version to start off with. This is really fascinating. It is, because there's so many parallels between what James Gunn is doing and Joss Whedon when you think about it, and Zack Snyder. Because everyone can say, yeah, he's got a 10-year plan. He's doing something very different to what Zack Snyder did. Hang on a minute. In Zack Snyder's universe, Wonder Woman was already established. Batfleck was already established by the time we got to BVS, which was only Man of Steel and then BVS. Batman and Wonder Woman were already established. Oh wait, in Superman Legacy, the superheroes and Superman himself were already established. So when people keep saying to me, you're a James Gunn hater, James Gunn is literally not doing anything different to Zack Snyder's version, except for the following. He's making a lighter tone. But Zack, that's again copying what Zack was doing. Because if you've looked at what the five-part arc was, we've only really had the first 3 parts of this arc so far. Superman was going to become much lighter. So realistically, I would say James Gunn is literally just ripping what happened in the SnyderVerse. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to go, you're a massive James Gunn hater. No, I'm really not. But if you look at what he's doing, established superheroes. I mean, if the plot leaks are real, which I have it on record, they're somewhat real. Superman Legacy is a variation of Black Adam and the Suicide Squad. Fascinating. Already established characters in a universe. Sounds a lot like the SnyderVerse. And it's very outlandish what Diane Nelson said about Joss Whedon's cut. And she was pretty much in charge at one point. Compares amateurish, certainly relative to Marvel. Basically said they should have gone with what Snyder was trying to do, except for people kept interfering with what Snyder was trying to do. Yeah, unless there was a meeting that she wasn't in, she claims Snyder was never in charge. Diana Nelson, born 1968, American business executive, who was president of DC Entertainment from 2009 to 2018, and president-in-chief of Warner Bros. Officer of Content. So she was pretty high up, so she knows her stuff. And obviously she left a few years back, but what she said is pretty outlandish. And yeah, now we have an independent studio. It's called DC Studios. I don't think the result's going to be anything different. It just seems to me that James Gunn is taking the best parts of what Snyder did. And people go, oh, but he's put in Jimmy Olsen. No one cares for Jimmy Olsen, let's be honest. Where's Jimmy Olsen in Superman and Lois? Jimmy Olsen, let's bring Jimmy Olsen in. Because we've got to make every comic book movie as comic book-esque and as comic book accurate as we can, because the general audience don't even read comics. No one cares for these side characters. In a Superman movie, they care for Superman, they care for Lois. In a Batman movie, they care for Batman, they care for Alfred. That's pretty much it. So likewise, guys, what do you think about Diana Nelson's comments? And she basically said there was no one in charge at DC or Warner Bros. At all in a roundabout way. Very interesting. Do you think James Gunn can salvage something out of what he could have already done because, you know, David Corset's 32 years old and he's already well established. So is it even a reboot? I don't freaking know. But this interview is pretty interesting. So like always, guys, check us out on Instagram at Warstu to see the beautiful face behind the beautiful voice. Check us out on Instagram at Warstu, and I'll catch you in another video very soon. Catch you later.